Tomorrow People series premiere. Now, first off, I gotta say, Mark Pellegrino, who's the villain in this episode, or I guess in the series really, he is always set as a villain in like every show he's ever been in. For anyone who might watch other shows on CW, you might have seen him as the devil from Supernatural. He's also the villain, or at least he was a villain in Being Human, and I'm pretty sure I saw him in something else where he was like a random bad guy. He's also the person who like punched Ted in the face like 5 years ago on How I Met Your Mother. Not once have I seen him play a good guy in anything, and I thought he was one of the good guys in this show, and then it turns out he's a villain yet again. But he always seems to be, just a main villain at some point in some show. And in this show, he's like the main villain overall. So if they do add other people in, he'll still be, the top villain. But series premiere, I thought it was a pretty good pilot. They showed off the superpowers. They introduced, all of them. They explained, the three T's. At least that's what they initially assumed: teleportation, telekinesis, and telepathy. For anyone who couldn't figure out what each power was, from the episode, teleportation is teleporting. I mean, that if you can't figure that out, there's no hope. Telepathy is, linking with someone mentally, having a mental conversation, and telekinesis is moving things with your mind, or as they mostly do in this episode, kind of just push other people around. But at the end of this episode, you know, Steven, the main character, he uses, I guess he stops time, whatever they end up calling it. If they call it like a fourth T and it's just time stop, that's what he ends up doing. And that was actually a really cool scene. And, that was a cool little revelation. And it obviously kind of shows like he's the one, he's obviously insanely powerful. And, they're in this building where generally, people like Steven and, all of the people that he meets, they can't use their powers, but of course he can because, he's his father's son. So he inherits, that strength that his father has. But the series, it starts off, fairly simple. His powers are, kind of sporadic. He doesn't know how to control them. He doesn't know that they're powers, and he thinks he's, kind of losing his mind. But, over time, once he actually, realizes, once they prove to him he is basically a superhuman, or homo superior, as they say, which kind of made me think of X-Men a lot. But, when they mentioned that, he was able to realize, people are teleporting, people are lifting things, with their mind, people are having mental conversations, obviously, with their mind. He, comes to the realization that he isn't human, and all the crazy things he's been dealing with are because of his powers, and actually because of, the meds he was taking, because everyone thought, he had, like, some disorder. So the pills he was taking for his disorder were actually, in a way causing the disorder, which was just his powers kind of, acting out of control. But, in the episode, he obviously, learns to control his abilities really quick when you think about it. At least, teleporting, he hasn't actually done much, telekinesis, and he even tries to do it to prove to his friend that, he's obviously a superhuman, and, he can't do it. So it would be cool to see how he advances, and obviously if they add more powers, it would be cool to see what other types of stuff he could do, and I would assume, aside from the three T's and plus, stopping time, it would kind of have to go beyond that if they do actually add more powers, sort of elemental type stuff, which would be cool to see. But I think that's, we're really far away from that considering this is the very first episode. But, the powers were shown off. All the fighting I thought was really well done, even in the facility when they can't actually use their powers, the characters, they're all fighting each other. It was a pretty cool little action scene. They had like some like really hardcore rock music going, which is actually pretty cool because I like rock music. But I thought that scene was well done. The fight scene in the very beginning of the episode I thought was pretty cool too, because obviously they were fighting while using their abilities, so they're fighting each other and then teleporting while punching and stuff like that. So I thought that was cool. Both sides of the spectrum. At least a little sample of people using their powers in the fight, and obviously odds are you've seen people just have a normal fight in real life, if not on TV a million times. But it was well choreographed, and I just enjoyed that scene. The story itself for the series is, it's not simple. I won't say that. It's just familiar, and once again, connecting to X Men, it kind of has that aspect of, humans versus superhumans, except this isn't, widely known right now. And then that kind of led me to think of the old movie Jumper, which I also kind of thought about because of how they all teleport, it made me think of that movie too. And if you haven't seen that, it's basically like the same thing where these people have superpowers, and it's only one power where they can teleport, and there's like a secret organization that's trying to kill those people because basically like a couple of people are bad, so they just deem the entire species as evil, so they try to kill them. And that's really how things happen in this show, where you know Steven's uncle, it's not Jedediah, but Jedekiah, I believe. He basically says, he gives them this list of people where this guy did this guy did that, and it's just like, because they have superpowers, they kind of just across the board say all these people must be evil, so they kind of recruit other people in to kill their own species. So that I thought was an interesting aspect that got introduced, because I thought initially, they're the good guys, and then there's just an organization, and it's just all superhumans, but it's actually led by a human who has found a way to basically cancel people's powers. And it was very interesting the scene that they show where you know Steven's species, they actually can't kill people, and I would assume since he's much more powerful, he could kill someone. But now that I think about it, in the episode when he's actually fighting against the bully, that's what happened to him. He like almost killed the guy because he was choking him for too long. And I guess there's some sort of subconscious trigger that realized, okay, if this goes any further, he will die. So his brain basically just, it kind of shut him down for a little bit. And it stopped him from killing him, even though he wasn't intentionally trying to kill the guy. So it'll be cool to see how that plays out, because like I said, it stopped him in this episode, but he also couldn't just pick up the basketball, and obviously in later episodes he'll be able to pick up, who knows what, at the drop of a hat. It could be insanely quick because he's just that powerful. So he could be able to overwrite that sort of thing in the future. But for this episode, and obviously the next couple, he's still going to be in the early stages and learning how to fit in with everyone and learning how to control his power, so he doesn't like wake up in his neighbor's bed and stuff like that. But I thought the episode was really interesting. One of the weirdest things to me was how his mother was always talking about how something didn't matter. It really makes it seem like she's hiding a ton of stuff. Either she knows about his father, and she knows about that whole world, and she's just trying to ignore it because it caused her to lose her husband, basically. And, she doesn't want to lose her son, too, and possibly both her sons if his younger brother does end up having abilities. So it always seemed weird. She's always like, it doesn't matter what the person said. And in the beginning, when she talks about the doctor, it didn't, bother me that much. It was just like, oh, well, he said, something like, obviously it's not helping as much, so she just stopped. And then it just seemed like she kept saying it. Like at the end of the episode, when he comes back to the house and he's trying to say like, I know it seems bad. She's just like, it doesn't matter. We have a visitor. Like no one would just randomly be like, no big deal, because your uncle's here who you didn't know is your uncle. So I feel like she has to know a lot more than we got from this episode. She knows something, or she's just like honestly a bad mom. I don't know. Well, not because of the first two things, but because of the last scene. It's kind of a bad mom move to be like, I don't care. Here's your uncle. Like that wouldn't stop anyone from doing, from checking on their kid. Like you've been gone all night. So I think she's hiding something. But the biggest twist, of course, was during that scene when Steven finds out that the guy who's like the main villain who's trying to kill off his entire species is also his uncle. And it kind of led right into the sibling rivalry stuff where one's human, one's superhuman. And he says that he was like, I became a geneticist so I could figure out and help my brother. But I think it's more just he was jealous and he wished he could have had those abilities, because that happens. Some people, you know, someone has superpowers, you wish you had those, and after a while, you just wishing kind of just turns into you being jealous that you can't, make it happen for yourself. So he wants to stop other people from being able to, have that. So just the whole dynamic of him being his uncle, I thought was actually really great for the show. And obviously, Steven accepts the job with his uncle so that he can kind of be like an inside man. And, that was really smart, on his part. Also incredibly dangerous, but he did do it mostly for his family and, you know, to find out the truth as to whether or not his father is actually dead or alive, because obviously, you know, the superhumans, they're trying to say, your dad was a hero and there's no way he's dead. And then his uncle is saying, he wasn't exactly a hero and he's dead. So, he's got two completely opposite stories and he has to find out the truth, obviously for himself. And the only way he can do that is by getting to, his uncle, who obviously has all the real answers, but obviously won't give him up because he's the bad guy. But I'm definitely excited for the series. I think it's pretty cool. I always love anything with superpowers, especially when it's done well. One of my favorite things is just how the teleporting looks, which obviously is going to be their main thing, is them, jumping from place to place. I think it looks cool. They always have a sound effect that goes with it too, if you notice, and it just kind of makes it its own signature thing. And it's not just, they just kind of vanish. They have like a little, it's sort of like a little light effect that goes with it, and the sound effect and stuff too. And then the telekinesis is fairly simple. Every time they do it, I just think like Hadouken, because that's how they just keep doing that, and it just makes me think Hadouken. But that's from Street Fighter, by the way. And everything else, and the time stopping time thing, I think that'll be cool once he actually controls it, and it'll be great to see what crazy situations he actually has to use it in. So that would be nice. And the main guy, and of course I can't think of like anyone's name from the show outside of the main guy. And honestly, the only reason I remember his name is Steven is because of Stephen Amell, who is Arrow, who is also the main character's cousin in real life. So that's the only reason I remember the main character's name in this show. But the guy who kind of recruits him almost, helps him on the very beginning, he seems like he has an interesting backstory. And initially, I thought he was the other guy's son, or Jedekiah's like son, because honestly, because they have blonde hair, and it was just like maybe it could happen. I don't know, but they obviously have some sort of interesting connection, because he mentions how he would spend most of his life running from him, and I really thought he was his son when Jedekiah said, you return home. That really made me think that he was his son, but obviously he's not. And if he is, then it'll be really cool that they didn't just like throw that at us in the first episode. And it would be cool if they kind of reveal that later on, like that's why he said he returned home, because that is his father. And then like him and the main character are actually cousins. So that would be kind of cool to see. But whatever it is, obviously he was captured, but he escaped somehow. So it'll be interesting to see what happened to him. And I would assume honestly that his family was killed off. That would be kind of like the most normal thing to think, is that his family was killed and he was taken and tortured and experimented on, and one day he finally escaped. But I'm excited to see just how he works with Steven, because of his connection with Steven's uncle, with him hating him so much. How will that play out when they kind of have to work together, even though Steven's kind of also working with his uncle? But comment below, let me know what you thought of this episode. Are you excited for the series? Do you like the superpowers? Do you like the story? Do you like the characters? Even though we mostly just got heroes and villains. We didn't really get much for like Steven's friend. She was obviously like his best friend who like the last one to stick around, and he has a brother and mom. That's pretty much all we got out of that. But are you excited for the characters? Are you excited for the powers and the show in general? Comment below. Let me know what you thought of the whole thing, and just let me know. Do you want to keep watching the Tomorrow People? Thanks for watching.